right, thank you for joining me on The Gospel Truth. I'm your host, Marlon Wilson, and we have an exciting show today. We have another debate. These Christian and atheist debates can get a little hot, a little heavy, but we always hear The Gospel Truth. We like to keep it kosher, you know what I mean? We like to keep it cool, relaxed, and let the debaters, sort of let them engage each other. But when they do engage, we like to keep it respectful and courteous. So I have Matt Slick and TJump on with me right now, and they're going to go at it for a good portion of the show, and it should be an exciting one. Matt Slick, I've followed him for many years, and his content has been extremely helpful in my growth in the faith, and I can't even put into words how helpful his stuff has been. And TJump, I have recently came to know. I had him on my show earlier in the year, and we had a cool conversation. If I could be honest, some of the stuff, all the scientific stuff, I ain't no scientist, I ain't with all that, you know what I mean? So it was a little over my head. I was like, oh man, I ain't want to have no conversation with TJump about no science, man. I'm good on that, but it's all good, man. TJump came on. He was real courteous. I appreciate him for coming on. But today we have a great debate between those two. And with that said, here at The Gospel Truth, we're engaging the culture of Christian truth. So not only does that mean debate, but we also have interviews. We have we have different teaching topics, and you can find all this stuff on my YouTube page, The Gospel Truth. So if you can go over there and subscribe, and if you can go on Facebook and like and follow all this stuff, I would appreciate it. Also share this debate, because it's not only do we think TJump need to hear the gospel, we also believe that others need to hear the gospel as well. So if you can go out and share this and put it out there, put all the information out there so other people can also hear this content. Also, just be aware of our upcoming events. I can update the calendar on my YouTube page of upcoming events that's coming up. So be on the lookout for all that stuff that's coming up. With that said, I'm going to bring in TJump and Matt Slick, and they're going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into the format, and then we're going to go right into the debate. So here we go. What's up, fellas? How's everything?
It's going. How you doing?
Doing good, man. Thanks for coming on, Matt. Appreciate you, man.
Hey, praise God, man. Thanks for having me on.
Amen. Thanks, Tom, for coming back on, man. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invitation. Always love being here. You're a great guy. Entertaining as always.
All right, cool, man. Cool. Appreciate you. So what we're going to do, man, we're going to go ahead and get to the introduction. I just want you guys to just introduce yourselves, and then we'll go into the format of the debate, and then we'll go into the each individual will get our introductions, then we'll go to the core of the debate. Is that cool?
It's cool.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, start with Matt Slick. You can go ahead and give a quick introduction.
I'm Matt Slick. That's quick. Oh, you probably want a little bit more.
Yeah, I want a little bit more, man. You can go for it, man.
Okay. Yeah, I got saved when I was 17. I'm 62 now. Been on fire for the Lord for a long time. I don't know why he's condescended to use such a fool as myself, but he has. And been doing apologetics since 1980, so that makes it about 39 years. And started CARM, Christian Apologetics Research Ministry. Started that almost 24 years ago. That will be in October, 24 years. And if I got my counts correct, we've had 150 million visitors on the site. I'm on 14 or 16 radio stations right now, written a few books, done a few debates, and love apologetics and defending my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who saved me out of the mire of my agnosticism and the occult and some other stuff that I was involved with. He saved me. So here we are.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you once again for coming on. And next up, we have TJump. If you give a quick introduction yourself.
I'm TJump. I run a YouTube channel called TJump, where I debate professors and theologians about reasons to believe in the existence of God, and I believe there are none, so I defend the atheistic position.
All right. There it is. Now that was fast. There it is, man. I was expecting you to give it a little longer than what Matt Slick did, but it's all good. All right, sorry, fellas. So this is how we're going to do it. The format is you're going to give about between the 5-10 minute opening statement. of your positions, and then we're going to go into just a back and forth, about 40-minute discussion, back and forth. I'm not going to interject, no 10-minute questions, Q&As, anything like that. So we'll go into that. And then we'll go to a quick closing of your final words for your position, and then we'll conclude the debate. Are we all good with that?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right, sounds good. Okay, Matt, you are up first to give a quick, how long? Most of 10 minutes opening statement.
All right, thanks. Well, thanks for having me on. And it's the first debate I've done in a long time because my life has been tumultuous, which we talked about before the debate started here. And so I've been so extremely busy that I've only done, no offense meant, but I've only done like 2 hours research on Tom. So I may misrepresent some of his positions, not intentionally, just out of ignorance. Apologize for that, but things have been very, very busy lately. Our debate tonight is, quote, is there any to believe in God, close quote. And I was surprised that anyone would want to debate that because it's a problem for the other side. See, I emphasize the word any because that's how I was approached with the topic, and Tom said that's correct. So my opponent, Tom, he has to take the negative. He has to say that there is no reason, not any reason, period, to believe in God. That would be his position. Mine is, well, yeah, there are reasons. So for Tom to assert the negative, he has to basically assert a universal negative and say that all reasons in all places, in all time, in the present, mainly, and the past, because the past leads to the present, that there's just no reason to believe in God. But this is it's an impossible proposition to defend. After all, he cannot know all reasons in all places and in the present as well as the past in order to say there is no reason to believe in God. It's just not a defensible position. And though he may present positions, some reason why all reasons don't work and all situations don't work, well, we'll see that those would probably be problematic because he would have to know all things, which is problematic. So I believe that Tom's lost a debate from the very beginning by agreeing to such a proposition, which is impossible for him to defend by the nature of what it is. He has to be able to assert that there's no reason, any time, any place, anyhow, any way to believe in God. How do you do that? You can't do that. Now, if he does not agree to that proposition, then I've been misled, but that is what he agreed to, so there you go. And I'm going to continue to hold his feet to the fire until he concedes that he cannot defend that position. And we won't go much further than that if that doesn't occur. Nevertheless, given that this position is not defensible, and since I now have the option of stopping my opening statement here or continuing with it, I thought what I might do is just to take some of the remainder of my time a little bit and give you some reasons for God's existence. Not an exhaustive thing, but let me give you a few. Now, whether or not they're convincing is up to your subjective preferences, and that's a problem. We could talk about subjectivity and not objectivity and truth and nature and things like that. But never. Remember, I'm only defending the Christian God, and I hope Tom has a sufficient understanding of Christian theology. If he doesn't, I'll correct him on certain areas where he fails. As is often is the case with atheists, no offense meant again, that they don't understand Christian theology at a sufficient level to argue this kind of stuff. We'll see if Tom's different. I don't know. Maybe yes. I don't know. So here's some reasons to believe in the Christian God. Remember, I'm only defending the Christian God, and I would join him in refuting all other gods. I would. No problem. But nevertheless, the Christian Trinitarian God can explain where the universe came from based on his personal decision to create. His personal decision to create. That's one. The Christian God can provide the necessary preconditions for universal moral absolutes. Now that's a tough one. Atheists can't defend the idea of universal moral absolutes because they're abstractions that have to have a ubiquity and a quality, that applies to all people everywhere all the time, which, of course, are transcendentals. And how do you have that in an atheistic worldview, which necessarily must be naturalistic? The Christian God can provide the necessary preconditions for the universal laws of logic. That's another discussion. The Christian God, as revealed in the Bible and in the person of Jesus Christ, speaks of an eternal consequence for sin. And since Jesus rose from the dead 3 days after his crucifixion, something he prophesied and something he attached to his own ministry and divinity, then it's worth considering as a reason. I think it's a good reason. Just in case God exists, be wise to find out about him since, well, he's bigger than we are. He's more powerful. Now, I think that's a good reason. If God exists, you better find out who he is. That's a good reason. I mean, I could have someone say, that's not a good reason. It's not a good reason if God exists to find out who he is because he's bigger and more powerful. Someone would have to be not a good reason. Okay, I don't know. Now we can get into more technical things. Life with its biological complexity, DNA complexity, the problems of abiogenesis, the information structures that are interwoven into DNA, RNA, and all this kind of stuff. It's best explained by designer, not by randomness, and the mathematics ports that out easily. Then there's the cosmological argument, transcendental argument, the moral argument, other arguments, and I just throw those out. I mean, he's not going to respond to all of them. I wouldn't expect him to. I'm not trying to do some verbal carpet bombing thing here. But, I can list other reasons, but these are just some of the ones that I think, just 7, I can put them in the text in our chat here, and he can go through them if he wants. He just ask me, and I'll paste them in there. I wrote them down. And so he'd have to say that not only are these no good, but all reasons they can come up with are just invalid. How do you do that? He's saying there isn't any reason. That's not a defensible position. So Tom has a monumental task ahead of him in order to defend his universal negative. And let's see how he does. That's my opening statement. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you. All right, Tom, you have 10 minutes to go ahead and open the statement.
All right, 1 sec. I just wanted to comment. Matt, you said there were 7. I only got 6. What was the 7th?
Hold on.
Will do. Unless I read something wrong or did something wrong or skipped one, but I'll put them in the Skype text, okay?
I'm not. I don't think I'm on BMX, so I can't see those. Could you read them off for me, please?
Oh, sure. The Christian God can explain the universe, where the universe came from. Christian God can provide the necessary preconditions for universal morals and the laws of logic. The Christian God, as revealed in the Bible and in the person of Jesus, speaks of an eternal consequence for sin. And since Jesus rose from the dead 3 days after his crucifixion, something he prophesied and something he attached to his own ministry and divinity, then it's worth considering as a reason.
Wait, was the eternal consequence for sin, was that a reason?
There's the logic. It's all the reason is because you have to understand Christianity is not a statement, it's statements. It's not a belief, it's beliefs. It's coherent.
Right.
So number 5.
So I mean,
go ahead.
the Jesus rose from the dead and there is an eternal consequence from sin. Is that 1 point or is that 2 points?
The Christian God, as revealed in the Bible and in the person of Jesus Christ, speaks of an eternal consequence for sin. Jesus does. And since Jesus rose from the dead 3 days after his crucifixion, this is all my number 5.
Okay.
And since Jesus rose from the dead 3 days after his crucifixion, the whole idea is his resurrection, which he promised, which he attached to his divinity and his ministry, that's a little on the important side, since that's not happened before. Number 5, just in case God exists, it would be wise to find out about him since he's big and powerful. Makes sense. Life itself, which is biologically comprised of super complex information structures embedded in DNA, which is best explained by a designer. And then there's other arguments. This is kind of a generic thing.
That was 6, right?
These. That's 6. But then there's my 7th was the cosmological, transcendental, moral. It's just thrown in. These are arguments.
All right, gotcha.
That people can use. So.
All right, gotcha. Thanks.
All right, no problem. All right, Tom, you have 10 minutes. Open the statement.
All right, so the question is there any reason to believe in the existence of God? And Matt is correct. I can't prove there are not. The whole reason I take this strong position is to make it really easy to falsify my position. All Matt has to do is present one reason to believe in God, and then my position is proven false definitively. So, I mean, he's right that I can't prove there are none because I don't have absolute knowledge, and I agree to that completely. My only point in taking that strong point is to make it really easy to prove me wrong. So I'm trying to give him the easiest line of reasoning he possibly can. Just present one and we're good, and I lose. So he's right. I can't prove that true, but my goal here is to make it easy for him, which is why I'm taking that position. So the reason we can know there are no reasons for the existence of God is because all of the evidence and arguments that are presented in order to indicate the existence of a God are simply just questions we don't know the answer to which God has been slapped on as a solution. And the way we can know this is because the same kinds of arguments are answered by many different possibilities. It could be a theistic God like the Christian God that Matt supports, or it could be a deistic God, or a polytheistic God, or a pantheistic God, or a naturalistic pantheistic God, which is like a kind of atheism where it's just an eternal, all-powerful nature, or it could be transtheism or omnism, or Pastafarianism, or an evil God, diatheism. These different equally answer all of the arguments Matt presented. So, for example, if you imagine we have a box and you claim there is a rabbit in the box, and your evidence for the rabbit is that the box weighs 2 pounds. Well, the 2 pounds isn't evidence of a rabbit because the 2 pounds could be explained by a lizard or a coffee mug or weights or Legos or a light bulb or any number of things that could weigh 2 pounds. So the 2 pounds isn't evidence of a rabbit. It's just evidence there's something in the box that weighs 2 pounds. The same thing applies to the arguments for these evidence of God. All of these arguments he presented can be explained by all of these different alternatives that I listed earlier, which means none of them are actually evidence of a God because they could be explained equally as well by non-God alternatives like naturalistic. So, for example, what is the origin of the universe? He printed it was his first point and his seventh point, so it was in two of his points. What was the origin of the universe? Well, the origin of the universe could come from naturalistic pantheism, an eternal, all-powerful, natural thing that created the universe. You don't need a God for that. What created the fine-tuning? Well, it could be an interconnection of the laws of physics from an undiscovered law of nature, which is grounded in pantheism. So you don't need a God for that one. What grounded objective morality and purpose and meaning and values and justice and logic? All of those could be undiscovered laws of nature. You don't need a God for those. Those could all be natural. The biggest misconception theists have is that they believe God is special and that only a God can be the ground of objective morality or tuning or logic or information or all of these other things, X, Y, and Z. My main goal in this debate or conversation tonight is to show you that that is not the case. Anybody can make up answers to all of these questions, and they'll be equally as reasonable as the theistic God. And the reason science doesn't do this is because it doesn't go beyond the evidence. When we ask what is before the universe or what created the universe, the science doesn't give us an answer to what's beyond it, so it just stops and says we don't know. Now, anyone can make up an answer. It could be a God, it could be the spaghetti monster, it could be naturalistic pantheism. Scientists could even add these omni properties that theists do and say, well, general relativity is all powerful and eternal, therefore we don't need a God because it was created by general relativity or something like that. Anybody can just make up answers to these questions. They're not actually evidence of something, they're just a question we don't have the answer to. So if we think about it like anything the supernatural can do, the unknown natural can do. So if you want to posit that there is some supernatural source, like a God, that can explain the origin of the universe, well, we can just say, well, there's an unknown natural cause that caused the origin of the universe. Theists like to say, well, it's impossible for naturalism to do X, Y, and Z. But that's like me saying it's impossible for the supernatural to do X, Y, and Z. If we haven't discovered it, you can't say what is or isn't possible because it's like saying, oh, look, a UFO, it must be aliens. If it's an unidentified flying object, you can't identify it as aliens. It's a contradiction. So because the supernatural and the unknown natural are unknowns, to say they cannot do something is a contradiction because you don't know anything about it. And then so the same thing applies. It's a self-contradictory position, self-refuting. And so it would be contradictory for Matt to say the natural cannot explain because we don't know all of the natural. We have no access to all of the natural. So just like I can't prove there is absolutely no evidence for a God in all of the universe because I don't have all knowledge, Matt can't prove the natural can't do X, Y, and Z for the same reason. He doesn't have access to all of the natural world. He only has access to the known natural. And so you can say the known natural can't explain, and I can grant that completely. But you can't say the unknown natural can't explain because it could. We have no idea. I mean, once upon a time, Einstein presented a theory that time can physically bend, literally bend. And people come up with the argument that, well, no, time is a philosophical concept. It's not a physical thing. It can't bend. It didn't care what we thought. It didn't care that we perceived something as a physical concept. It was actually a physical concept. So nature doesn't care if we think it's a physical concept. That doesn't mean it is. It could still be physical and non-philosophical, even if we think it's philosophical. It's the only thing we can imagine. The fact that that's all we can imagine is just an argument from incredulity. The fact that we can't imagine otherwise, it doesn't mean it isn't otherwise. So all of these evidence and arguments that are presented by Matt are simply just questions we don't know the answer to. What caused the origin of the universe? We don't know. What is the objective grounds of morality? We don't know. But if Matt wants to come up with answers, like a theistic God, we can just do the same thing with science and just come up with a naturalistic answer. There's nothing stopping science from doing this. The only reason that science doesn't is because it doesn't go beyond the evidence. It doesn't start asserting things that can't be demonstrated to not be imaginary, unlike theism, which does.
All right. Is that it? That's it, Tom? You good?
Yep, I'm good.
All right, cool. All right, fellas. Thank you for the opening statement. So now we're going to go into basically a 40-minute discussion. With the discussion, obviously, we expect it to be cordial. Try not to walk on each other as far as, talk over each other. Let's try to hear what each other's saying so we can have a good conversation. Because remember, not only you guys are engaging, but also the audience is engaging, and they would like to be able to hear clear, concise statements from each one and responses as well. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get out the way of you guys and go ahead, take over. We got about a 40, I don't know if you guys want to go longer, let me know, 40-minute discussion. So you guys got the stage.
Matt, I can't hear you.
You're muted. Matt, I think you're muted.
There we go.
There you go.
So, Tom, I got a question for you. Are you a festinator?
I have no idea what that is. What is that?
The involuntary inclination to walk quickly. You talk so fast, I'm assuming you're also a festinator.
No, it's just practice. I talk fast because I try to get my ideas out as fast as possible to give you as much time to talk as you want. In most of my conversations, I usually spend like 10% of the time talking and let the other person go for like 80%. So I want to get my ideas out as fast as possible.
Yeah, the Dilhandi approach. So you concede the debate. You concede you lost the debate. You can't defend the opening assumption, the topic.
Well, I can't prove there are none, but you can win the debate really easily. All you have to do is present one that actually is. So my goal here isn't to show, prove universal truths. I can't do that, and no one can do that, and I'm sure everyone understands that. So most of the people understand that my point is just to make a very low bar that you have to falsifiability. You can falsify my position in a second. Present one thing that's evidence of a God, and I lose completely. I stop being an atheist. I become agnostic or whatever. So my goal isn't to defend the strong interpretation of defend the weaker ones. You just have to present one, and I lose.
Do you think it's reasonable to say that if God exists, that it'd probably be a good idea to know if he exists because, he's bigger than we are, can do stuff to us? Think it's a decent enough reason right there?
Well, that's a reason to search for a God, but that's not a reason to actually believe there is one.
Okay. So to search for him would presuppose the idea of his existence is to look for him. That's a reason to believe in God, is that he can do stuff to us.
Well, I mean, we can search for unicorns. That doesn't mean that unicorns exist.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So how about this one? I'm just curious. The Christian God has revealed, I got some other questions that really get into some real good stuff here. But the Christian God, as revealed in the Bible and in the person of Jesus Christ, speaks of an eternal consequence of sin. And since Jesus rose from the dead 3 days after his crucifixion, according to the scriptures, something he prophesied, John 2:19-21, and something he attached to his own ministry and divinity, John 8:24, John 8:58, John 10:30-34, then it's worth considering as a reason. Don't you think that would be a reason to consider the person and work of Christ?
Well, I think that's actually two arguments there. One is Pascal's wager or something, and one is the resurrection of Jesus. So first, just to address there's an eternity of possible punishment if we don't believe. Is that a reason to believe? Well, no, because the opposite is equally likely to be true without any other supplementary reason. For example, it could be the case that if I pick my nose on a Tuesday, I could be a damned nose picker God. Or it could be the case that if I pick my nose on a Tuesday, I could be eternally rewarded by the nose picker God. And without some reason to say one is more likely than the other, then we have no reason to take one action over the other or to believe one consequence over the other. So the fact that there could be an eternal consequence for not believing in God, well, there could also be an eternal consequence for believing in God. We don't know, and until we present some additional evidence there's no reason to prioritize one over the other. So that would not itself be evidence. The second thing you mentioned was the resurrection of Jesus. Now, I believe Jesus existed as a human being. I think that's essentially incontrovertible. All the historians agree on that. But I don't believe there's any to believe that the resurrection actually occurred. I don't think there's any evidence to support that. Now, if it did, if you can show that it did, that's evidence. I grant it. You win.
Well, we can have Bible studies sometime if you're interested. We can get into that. But Pascal's wager thing, if you have two pills, one's poison, one's not, each is just as likely to be the one that you take. It's reasonable to want to find out which one's the right one. The issue of saying that Pascal's wager, the reputation he gave, isn't a good one, because the fact is you only have two options. He is or he is not. And it's wise to find out that he is, just as there are two pills, one's poison, one's not, which is the case. It's just simple. But you see, the problem here is we're arguing about subjectivity and preferences. Your presuppositional assumption is that God cannot exist because you're a naturalist. Is that correct?
No, that is incorrect. I do not say God cannot exist. And I do not say that only the natural exists. There could be supernatural, absolutely. But I'd like to address that point you made about the two pills. Not two pills. In fact, there's infinitely many pills. There could be a God, or there could be the spaghetti monster, or it could be polytheism, or there could be transtheism, or there could be naturalistic pantheism, or there could be the nose picker God. So there's infinitely many pills here, and you're just picking one of the pills and saying, well, it's either this one or not this one. Well, there's lots of other options there. There's the option that there's the Christian God who rewards you, and there could be the anti-Christian God who punishes you for belief in Christianity. Those are both options. So you have the God, not God, and anti-God. So there's always more pills there. It's not just two.
Is it true that God either exists or does not exist?
Yes.
You only have two options here, right?
Well, no, because there's more than one possible God.
I said God exists, or it's not the case that God exists. By logical definition, there's not possibilities of others. It's just the thing and the negation of the thing. You understand that, right?
Right, but there could be other things that exist. The fact that one object, like Apple exists or doesn't, or do unicorns exist and do unicorns not exist, that doesn't exclude the possibility of leprechauns. So leprechauns could still exist always. It's not just the two there. So
unicorns are not leprechauns, God or not God.
Right. So if God doesn't exist, that does not stop other things from not existing. There could be other things that exist, even if God does.
Thanks. The assertion here is it's either the case that God exists or it's not the case that God exists. That's a logical necessity. You agree?
Right. I agree. But there's other things.
So then, since you only have two options here, right? God existing or God not existing.
Right.
Okay. So in that case, one pill is poison or one pill is not poison. It's either the case that this pill is poison or it's not the case that this pill is poison. Let's just go with one pill. It's either the case that it's poison or it's not the case that it's poison. Would you want to know if you're going to take it?
Again, I think you've misunderstood the logic here. Like, yes, you're right that there's a dichotomy. Either God exists or God does not exist. That is a dichotomy. But that doesn't preclude the existence or non-existence of anything other than a God. So there could be the Christian God, or there could be pantheism, or there could be transtheism or polytheism. Those things are not gods, or you could call them a different kind of a god or something along those lines. But those would be other pills. There are other options of other pills. So whether or not this particular pill exists or does not exist is irrelevant to the math. There could be a pill that's poison and a pill that's not poison and a pill that's more poison and a pill that's less poison. There's not just two pills here. The fact that either God exists or God does not exist, possibility that there are other pills.
You're arguing with me, not a deist, not a pantheist, not a panentheist, not a Mormon, not a Jehovah's Witness, not a Muslim. I can define those different gods for you. I would be glad to come on a show with you and side with you on why all those are false. Not a problem. But that's not why I'm arguing, or not what I'm arguing about. The issue is the Christian God, of course. There's only the God, or there's a case that there is not the God. You've already existed that that is the case. The pill that you're going to take is either poison or it's not the case that it is poison. We're talking about one thing here. You're saying, well, that doesn't mean that other things don't exist. A cup, I agree. But we're not talking about taking a cup into our body or dirt outside or a plane across the continent. It's just simply one simple thing. And what you're trying to do, what you have to do from your position, is cloud the argument and obscure the logic in order to try and get out from underneath the necessity that there is. Because if there is only one pill, it's either poison or it's not poison, it is worth finding out whether or not it's poison or not, because there's a consequence. God either exists or it's not the case that God exists. It's worth finding out because there's a consequence to his existence related to you. Simple.
All right, right. I agree.
Then you just conceded again.
The problem is that there
You agree.
isn't one pill. That's false. That is provably false. That there is not just one pill.
I didn't say
So
there
the
was
fact,
just one
if I have
pill.
one pill in my hand and I can say this pill is either poison or not poison, how many pills am I holding in my other hand?
Well, we're not talking because that's not talking about that. One pill in your hand, is that pill poison or not? That's the topic.
Right, right. But but that doesn't tell us whether or not there's any pills in my other hand, right? There could be, there may not
It's
be.
irrelevant.
It doesn't tell us anything.
It's irrelevant.
Exactly.
That's the pill you're going to take in your hand.
No, that's the false part. That's the part that's logically false. I don't have to take that pill. I can take all of these other pills. There are all these other options other than the God. So, for example,
all
God,
the other
there
pills
could be a God.
are no good. I'll stand with you and argue against those other pills.
Right?
We're
No,
not
I'm
talking
saying
about
those
a bunch of other pills. Come on, think.
No, I am.
God
That's my
exists, or it's
position.
not the case that God exists.
Right. I'm defending those other pills. So I'm saying those other pills are equally non-poisonous as your pill. Those pills are equivalent to your pill. Now, I think they're all nonsense, including yours, but those other pills are equally as supported as your pill.
You agreed it was either the case that God exists or it's not the case that God exists. The one God.
Yes, and it's
you agree. That's a logical necessity.
yes, I agree.
Okay. Based on that logical necessity, the one God, it's reasonable to say that we should know if he exists or not. Because, not to be mundane about this, but I'm going to just say it this way, he's bigger than us and he can judge us. Okay? There's consequences. There's some things he can, all right? So God either exists or it's not the case that God exists. You've already conceded that. Okay?
Right, I agree. I agree.
Right. And I'm just trying to show you an analogy. There is a pill. By definition, I said a pill. There is a God, the one I'm going to defend. There's a pill. Yes, there are other pills in existence. Yes, there are many other pills that actually exist. But that's a different topic because this is only the one pill that relates to the one God, the God that exists, or it's not the case that the God exists. One pill, one God, by analogy, make it easier. That pill is either poison or it's not the case that that pill is poison. That's a logical, consistent statement. Is it important for you to know that that pill is important? Is it a reason for you to know that that pill is poison or not? Yes, there is a reason because it could kill you, harm you, make you sick.
Well, again, the question is do I have a reason to believe that pill is either poison or not poison? Now, of course, we want to know if it's poison or not poison, but that's not a reason to believe it is poisonous or is not poisonous. I agree we want to know, but do we have a reason to believe the pill is poisonous, or do we have a reason to believe the pill is not poisonous?
This is an illustration of logic. It's either the case that it's poison or it's not the case that it's poison.
Right.
That's just it. Now you say, is there a reason to believe that this particular pill is? That's not the argument. It's true logically. It either is or is not. I hand you see with me, you would be able to trust me. Yeah, that's where this blows up in my face. I'm going to hand you a pill. Hey, is it poison or not? You're going to go, of course you're not going to do that to me because you can trust me, right? All right. Let's say an ISIS member from Islam, and we can go and I can teach on Islam how bad it is, how evil it is. They want to kill you, they want to kill me. They hate atheists, okay? They hate atheists, they hate Christians. I don't know which one worse, okay? So he comes in and goes, he's got you tied up. He goes, take this pill. It might be poison or not poison. You've got a reason to believe it could be poison. Is it important for you to know? Yeah. It's not the case that leads all to this. It's the issue is, if it's poison or it's not the case that it's poison, there's a reason for you to know because it has a consequence. God either exists or it's not the case that God exists. Yeah, it's important for you to know if he exists because there's a consequence if he does.
Do you know the difference between epistemology and ontology?
Ontology from the Greek ontos has to do with nature and essence of a being. Epistemology comes from pistis, which has to do with knowledge. And epistemology and ontology are related. I think that where I am is an ontological statement that presupposes ontology and then goes into epistemology as a conclusion based on ontological essence or relationship.
Right. So if we have a reason to want to know if God exists, that's not a reason to believe he does exist or does not exist. So we have a reason to want to know, that's an epistemological claim. But if we have a reason he does exist, that's an ontological claim. Those are two separate things. Would you agree?
They're related, and I would say that just to a degree, yes. But the point is, God either exists or it's not the case that God exists. You agreed? Since
Yes.
he can judge us, is it important to know if he's existing or not?
Yes, but whether or not it's important to know whether he exists
over
isn't a reason to believe
lost it. You said yes.
No. Again, you're confusing
You said
epistemology and
yes. It's
ontology.
recorded.
Yes, because you misunderstand the question. So you're confusing epistemology and ontology. Do we have a reason to want the brick in your backyard? Yes, that would be very beneficial. Is that a reason to believe there is a gold brick? No. The fact that we want it to be true isn't evidence it's true. So it's not a reason to believe God exists. It's a reason we want to know whether God exists, but it's not a reason he does exist. Do you understand the difference?
Sure, it's not an issue of wanting to know. I'm not talking about wanting to know. You are. It's either the case that God exists or it's not the case that God exists. And I said,
your argument
since God can judge us, is that a good enough reason? You go, yes.
Okay, so whether or not God can judge us is a reason we would want to know. It is not a reason
Sure, you should want to know. It's a logical reason.
Right. I agree. So we have a reason we want to know. That's epistemology. We do not have a reason there is a God.
Oh,
so
whoa. So you admit it is a reason to want to know if he does exist.
Yes, I agree. That's epistemology.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So now you're saying it's a good reason to see if God exists.
Yes.
You said any reason, because the debate you do, is there any reason to believe in God? And the reason is, yeah, because he can judge us. We should believe in him and know what he wants.
No. So we have a reason to want to know, but we don't have a reason to believe there is. Want to know is epistemology. What? Believe there is ontology.
Okay. So you're going to say that the question is an epistemological
yes.
or ontological
so it's like,
question?
The question is epistemological.
Is there any reason to believe in God? Epistemological or ontological? Question.
Well, it's epistemology because it has to do with knowledge, but it's a question about the God's existence. Do we believe that God exists?
Oh. So then the question deals with both ontology and epistemology.
No, because the God part is a noun that has to do with only ontology. It's not questioning, do we have reason to think there's a God? It's do we have reason to want there to be a God? Is there a God? Do we have reason to believe there is a God? Not do we have a reason to believe or to want to believe there is a God? Those are two separate things.
Okay, epistemology, I'm writing in my notes, is there any reason, epistemology, to believe in God, ontology?
Yes. So the question is an ontological question. It's asking a question about ontology. Is there God exists? Ontology. Whether or not we want the God to exist, that's purely epistemological. It has nothing to do with ontology. We could want it to exist regardless of whether or not it does. Those are separate questions.
Any reason can include want, but it can also conclude logical necessity.
I can want there to be a gold brick in my backyard. Is that a reason to believe there is a gold brick in my backyard?
Yes, it's a reason to believe that's there. You can want it because it may be the case that it's there, but I have to go check to see if it is.
The fact that I want it to be there is not a reason to believe it is there. Those are different things.
I don't know. See, you don't understand what let me unpack it. Desires are never by themselves unless you're mentally deranged. We have our beliefs, we have our sets of assumptions in a set of other things. I want there to be a new car out in my driveway when I get done with this debate. Now, I don't believe it's going to occur, but it's certainly possible that it could, because I have a lot of people who love me, which does not make any sense. I don't know why they would. And I've mentioned, hey, I know I need a car. So it's possible it could be out there. So there is a relationship to the desire and the actuality. It's a possibility, but it doesn't mean that my desire creates the reality.
No, you listed a reason. You said there are people that love me, and that I said I wanted a new car. Those are reasons. Those are reasons to believe there could be a new car, because those give you logical possibilities of it appearing. The fact that you want it alone with nothing else gives you nothing. It's not a reason to believe there's going to be a new car. You have to add those other reasons, right? So I'm saying the same thing applies.
Facts are not facts by themselves.
Okay, so I'm saying the same thing applies to your example. The fact that we want there to be a God or want to know whether or not there's a God who's going to punish us or not is like you wanting there to be a car in your garage. That alone isn't good enough. You need that other piece, the piece of that there are people who love you and that they want to give you a car. Those are reasons. But you don't have those for the God example. You want to know whether or not there's a God who's going to punish us. So we have that
Ontology is
want.
related to epistemology. Do you understand that, right?
They're separate fields.
Yes, they relate to one another.
Everything in philosophy relates to itself. They're all
Okay.
branches of philosophy. So, but they're separate fields. You can't conflate one of the other.
Well, they blend over. I mean, you have an ontos, you have a nature, you're human, you can think, and so therefore you can know things. So that your ontological nature of being human means that you have the capacity to be rational, as an example. Without
Right,
that
that's all
ontos,
ontology.
you can't have that.
Well, everything you just listed was ontology. There's no epistemology there.
No, you can know things, how you know things, because it's a process of the mind. Knowing is a process of the mind. It's an abstraction.
Right, that's ontology. That's not epistemology.
Epistemology is a study of how we know things.
Right.
And so you can have experiential knowledge. You can have rational deductive knowledge. You can have intuitive knowledge. You can have scientifically based knowledge. You can have mathematical knowledge. You can have knowledge based on, if I love my wife, I will do certain things, and I can convey that knowledge to you. There's knowledge of training, knowledge of habitual development. There's all kinds of different kinds of knowledge, and they relate to the thing. Like, for example, martial arts. I took martial arts for years. Training, how to do something. That's not a good example. Let's get back on track. Epistemology relates to ontology. You're a human being, and therefore you're able, because of your nature, you're able to study and learn and ask questions and learn about things. You could not do that if you weren't a human being. If you were a cat, you couldn't do it. Or a doorknob, you couldn't do it. So ontology relates to that and how you're able to relate them.
Everything in philosophy is related. They're all branches of philosophy, but they do not correlate in the sense that you're trying to describe them. But let's go bring this back to the example itself. So the fact that we want to know God that's going to punish us or give us rewards is not itself a reason to believe there is a God who is going to punish us or not going to punish us. Just like whether or not we want to know there is a car in our garage is not a reason to believe there is a car in our garage. You need something else. Do you follow what I'm saying?
It's not an issue of want. You're misrepresenting the.
How so? What do you mean?
It's either the case that God exists or it's not the case that God exists.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So
by definition, we have to define what God is. I'm only arguing the Christian God. The Christian God judges.
Yes.
Okay. So since he judges, and since Christian God exists, and our universe depends on him, knowledge depends on him, information depends on him, then it's a reason to know him.
So a reason to know him is not a reason he exists. Those are two separate things, remember? A reason to a reason to know there's...
The question under discussion, is there any reason to believe in God?
Right.
To believe. That is an issue of desire, unless you want to say your beliefs aren't your own and you don't make choices to believe. And if that's the case, and nothing that you believe is of your own will, then you're an automaton, a determinist. So your beliefs have to be your own by your exercise of your will. And that is because of a desire and or intellectual machinations, the product of what you are. The debate title is there any reason to believe? Now, define for me what you think belief is.
Well, I think you're focusing on the wrong word here. So when I say believe in God, I mean believe God exists. That is what I mean by those words. Is there a reason to believe God actually exists? I'm not saying, is there a reason that we want to believe there's a gold brick in the backyard? If you want to count that as a reason, okay, I'll just grant that and call that a different kind of reason. You're not addressing my point. So my point only concerns, is there a reason to believe God actually exists? Not, is there a reason that we could want him to exist?
Okay.
So,
you're changing the title, the debate topic then.
No, I'm clarifying. So my position was never, we could want God to exist. I can grant that immediately. Sure, I can want there to be going to give me eternal life. Sure, that isn't a reason to believe he actually exists. So my position has always been, is there a reason to believe he actually exists? That's what I mean when I understand that sentence, always. So you maybe interpreted it in a different way.
Well, that's one of the issues of clarification, isn't it? Because if we're going to discuss that, you're saying, is there any intellectual, logical reason to believe that God exists?
Sure, I would go to reason. I wouldn't say intellectual or reasonable. I think those are specific to a certain category. Because you can come up with other reasons, maybe. But yeah,
you want logical reasons?
Sure, from my criteria. That I don't know about that's illogical, and that could be a reason, so I'm not going to rule that out. But so I just want to focus on, is there reason to believe God exists?
Okay, let's nail down what the reason is. Is there any reason? So logical reason, experiential reason?
I'd go with ontological. Is there any or epistemological reason to believe God ontologically exists? Is that clear enough?
Okay, say it again. Sorry, because I was thinking ahead.
Is there any epistemological reason to believe God ontologically exists?
Any epistemological reason? What do you mean by epistemological reason?
Ways to know, like you defined it, just the study of the ways to know things.
The ways to know things. So is there any way to know God exists?
No, you don't have to. There's no proof here. I'm not asking for proof. I'm just asking for, is there anything that leads the level, the 50-50 to the 51% to believe he does exist as opposed to he does not exist?
Well, I'm just trying to understand. You said epistemological reason. I'm only trying to understand what that means. So I'm trying to understand it. So I'm going to put words in your mouth. You correct me. Okay. So you're saying epistemological reason. Is there any way to know that God exists?
No, I'm saying, because we can't know anything with absolute certainty other than math or logic. I'm just saying, is there any reason that indicates he exists as opposed to does not exist?
Wait a second. We can't know anything for absolute certainty.
Other than math and logic. Math and logic?
Except
math and logic.
Are you a naturalist by any chance? Are you a materialist in the universe?
No, I do not believe that there is only material. I believe there is only material that we know about. There could be a supernatural. I will not rule that out, but I don't have any reason to believe that yet.
Okay. Okay, so we don't certainly accept math and logic.
And
are you married? Are you married?
No.
Do you exist?
Yes, I would. That one I'd add also. That one is also.
Okay, so math, logic, and existence. And self-existence. Yes. Okay. I could ask some other things, but whatever. I don't still understand what you mean by epistemological reason. Sorry. Just tell me what it is. Okay. I'll write it down.
Okay, so I would just say, like you said, it's a logical necessity. Either God does exist or does not exist. And so an epistemological reason would be a reason that indicates he does exist more so than he doesn't exist.
Indicates he does exist more so than he does not exist. You see the problem with that?
No. What's the problem?
More so.
Yes.
Okay. So the Bible is sufficient reason to indicate that God exists. That's more evidence than he does not. You're going to say the contrary. So now we're back to square one. So that doesn't work. The reason that indicates, because that's subjectivism. The reason for you. A reason based on your subjective, experience?
No. I'm going with the same kind of logic that you are. Like if it either X exists or does not exist, and if it logically indicates both it does exist and does not exist equally, then it isn't evidence it exists.
So a reason is mean a logical reason.
Yeah, I would go with logic.
He does exist more than he does not exist.
Well, I would go with a logical reason, but if there's something else that you could demonstrate, I'd be happy to interpret that as well.
Okay, but I'm trying to understand your position. So then epistemological reason for God's existence means a reason based on logic that indicates he does exist more than he does not exist.
No, again, that's a possibility. There could be other possibilities. I have not ruled them out. So my criterion is just this. There is something that indicates he does exist more than exist. That's it. Full stop.
So there's something that indicates he does exist more than not exist. I'm trying to make it as fast as I can. Okay, can you give me an example of what that would be sufficient for you? Because this is subjective. Because I could give you a criteria and you reject it. Okay.
Jesus'
And,
resurrection. If you could,
so what's
if you
yours?
could demonstrate. Mine is future testable predictions. I like that one. That one convinces me pretty easy.
Testable predictions. You see the problem with that?
Novel future. No, that one works.
Future testable predictions presupposes a scientific method. You're presupposing naturalism in that. Testable.
No. You can test the supernatural.
How do you test God's existence? Repeatedly.
Well, you can test.
And how do you differentiate that a repeatable test is something different than a naturalistic phenomena?
You can't prove it with absolute certainty, and you don't need to. That's not what science does. So, for example, a supernatural thing, like a supernatural fairy or whatever, and I can make a prediction. If there is a supernatural fairy, then every time I do this ritual, the fairy will produce a gold brick, and I do the ritual and gets a gold brick. That's evidence of the supernatural. It's not proof of the supernatural, but it is evidence of the supernatural.
How do you know that?
Because it's a future testable prediction. That's the criterion of demonstrating the evidence. That I just
a gold blick appears. A gold blick. Wow.
Gold blick.
A gold blick. Yeah.
Yes.
A gold
that would
brick.
Also be evidence.
What's that?
That would also be evidence, like the magical supernatural blick. I like it.
Yeah. We'll have to use that as the magical red blick, whatever that is. Okay, so a gold brick, you pray and say, may a gold brick appear in my hand. There it is. Now you believe in the supernatural. How do you know that it isn't just something that's naturalistic? How do you determine the difference?
The future testable prediction. Like if you can make a prediction that I can't and it gets it right, then your hypothesis is more likely to be true than my hypothesis. It gives you evidence that X is true more than X is not true. That's evidence.
Wait a minute. Future predictable. You brought up the gold brick. So if I were to say in 5 seconds a gold brick's going to appear in your hand, and there it happens in 5 seconds, does that mean God exists?
Yeah, so you'd say something like, if God exists, then a gold brick will appear in your hand in 5 seconds. And then if we wait 5 seconds and a gold brick appears, that's evidence of a God. Yes.
Okay. So that would be a reason to believe.
Yes, it would like, all I'm asking for is just raise it by 1%. You don't have to do like a whole like proof of 100%. Yeah. But yes, that would raise the evidence. That would count as evidence. Yes.
Yeah, you don't want to talk about percentage. That's a whole other problem. So future predictability. How about past predictability?
I would still count that as like if you try to predict there is a fossil in this layer, like if evolution is true and the geological scale works, then we can predict there is a fossil at this layer. I would still call that a future testable prediction, even though it's about the past. Does that make sense? And I'm not sure what you mean by past.
How about the crucifixion prophecy of Jesus in Psalm 22, written 1,000 years BC, and crucifixion did not exist at the time it was written? Or the fact that he's born in Bethlehem, Micah 5:2, or born of a virgin, and that is what it meant, the word virgin, because it's in the Greek Septuagint Parthenos, which means virgin, out of Isaiah 9:6, or of a certain lineage, a certain place, a certain time. Or the fact that in Daniel chapter 9, verses 25-27, that there's a prophecy of when the Messiah will come in to Jerusalem, and the weeks, it talks about the weeks, and you interpret it according to the biblical method, and you get 177,880 days, which is exactly when Jesus Christ came walking in on the thing. I mean, stuff like that. Which
yes, that would all count. That would all. Yes, that would all count as evidence.
Is that evidence?
If it was true, yes. The problem is that when I look at those and read into them, they're super vague and arbitrary, and you can interpret them in any way you want.
Super vague?
Yes.
It's like a punk band.
Yes. It probably is. So
super vague.
Yes. So if I said there's a guy named Bob somewhere in that direction, and you go and you look for Bob and you don't find him, and I say, well, no, keep going. He's over there somewhere, and you can keep going and keep looking, and you keep turning back, and you say, well, no, keep going, and eventually you find Bob. That's super vague prediction. But if you said Bob is 500 feet in that direction, you look, hey, 500 feet there, let's go. That works. So if what you said about
tell me if this is super vague, which means it can mean anything. Super vague.
Super vague.
Super vague. I like this because I tease my wife about using the word super. That was super good. And I go, super? And with a super supper?
Duper?
And she just gives me the look. Okay, so this is Psalm 22, starting at verse 11. Be not far from me, for trouble is near, for there's no one to help. Many bulls have surrounded me, strong bulls of Bashan have encircled me. They open wide their mouth at me as a ravening and a roaring lion. I'm poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax, it is melted within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, that's a broken pot. My tongue cleaves to my jaws, that means he's dehydrating, thirsty. You lay me in the dust of death, for dogs have surrounded me. Dogs is a term for Gentiles by the Jews. And I can show you that from the New Testament as well. A band of evildoers encompassed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones, means it's not broken. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing to cast lots. That's super vague.
Yeah, all of those things can be interpreted in many, many different ways and can be applied to many, many different people. So yeah, that's super vague. I'm not an expert on that, Barry, but I can definitely give you to have on. So that part is super vague.
Do you see the subjectivism that you're overlaying on everything?
Well, no, I'm saying it's not my interpretation here. I'm saying it's the interpretation of the experts who actually know the Hebrew and the Greek and can actually translate it and actually can show it. Yes, these words can mean lots of different things and can be interpreted in lots of different ways. The experts in the field who actually understand the topic far better than I do show that it can be interpreted in many different ways. Yes.
At the risk of toot my own horn, I have been studying this stuff for 39 years. I have a master's of divinity, and I know people who read Hebrew. We've gone over this kind of stuff. The super vague thing doesn't fit. I think you're stretching, you're reaching, but that's okay.
I mean, that's a fair interpretation, but I would look at the academic consensus of the most qualified people in the world who've studied it significantly more than you have, and they come to the opposite conclusion. I think they're more credible sources here. I apologize if that is offensive in any way.
No, it's not the slightest. Not the slightest offensive. I think it's a reasonable assertion for you to make. Are you going to do that?
What?
Are you going to do that and make a consensus on that? And look.
Yes. Yes, I have looked. Yes.
Okay. Good. Also, if I were you, I could send you the information. Here's something just to think about, because you remember any reason, and we talked about predictability and repeatability and things like that. Let me show this to. I'll read it to you. Sorry. Here I'm going to my notes. I want to make sure I get this right.
Oh, take your time.
I can show you stuff. We don't have time. 100,880. Okay, here we go. I'm not going to make a long thing out of this. This is Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. I can send you the information. And a week of years is called a Shebuim. Cut off is Karath. Executed 70 weeks. Daniel 9, 25. I got all this stuff. And it was from a specific thing that was given as a date, a specific historical marker. King Artaxerxes of Persia issued the command in Nehemiah 2, verses 2 through 9, to rebuild Jerusalem on March 14th, 445 BC. From that mark all the way out into the future. You can check this out. And you can see. Okay?
I have.
173,880 days.
Right. And when I look at the Greek and Hebrew interpretations, it's super vague and can be interpreted in many different ways.
Super vague.
Okay. Yes.
Jesus says in John 21, he cast it on the other side. They caught 153 fish. In the 4 separate Gospels, 153 the blessing from Jesus. And those 4 Gospels are written over 20, 30, 40-year period.
I could say the same thing about any holy book where they do interpretations of numbers.
Please do.
I have. These analyses exist.
You said you could with any other holy book. Please do.
Yes, they happen all the time where these numerical analysis, numerical patterns. It's titled. They have like names for these in history of this occurring because it's so common. So I mean, it's like
what I do for a living, right? You know what I do for a living. I challenge these things. I'm still waiting for them to show up. Maybe you got something I don't. I love it. So you're going to find out information and give it to me on this?
Absolutely, I can do that. I have information saved in my giant document that I have where I'm writing a book for it. So yes, I mean, all of this stuff, again, since I'm not an expert in Greek or Hebrew, I'm going to defer to the experts on this one. And the experts say these are super vague and can be interpreted in many different ways. I mean, one of my favorite guys
is super vague? Do any experts say they're not super vague?
Yes, a very small minority.
Oh, so you've done a comparison of all the super experts.
No, I just give you a quote. Most biblical scholars and historians hold to it that the study of miracle claims lies outside of the bounds of a historian acting within professional capacity. Michael Lacona, Historians and Miracle Claims, 2000 something or another.
Oh, so
Yes, most historians and biblical scholars do not take this seriously.
most
That
don't.
has been studied.
I want to see a list of the most, for one thing, which I don't think you'll produce. And we could go through the historical reliability of the New Testament documents. I can go. We're off track, but I can show you this stuff because it doesn't matter. You're going to do. You're going to do scholar quoting. You're going to do just scholars that suits your position. That's all you're going to do. I show you something from the text itself, and you say it's super vague. It's not super vague. Your presuppositions are what's clouding you.
Well, again, this is not me. I'm going off of the experts in the field on this one because I am not an expert in Greek or Hebrew, so I can't actually. I'm not qualified to judge that. The experts in the field who are qualified to judge that say it's vague. I mean, because if you were
just
right,
so you know,
and these
Hebrew is Old Testament, Greek New Testament.
Right, and we're comparing like Old Testament prophecies that happened in the New Testament, correct?
Old Testament prophecies that were then translated into the Greek Septuagint around 200 to 250 BC by the Jews. We have those copies, and so those things point to Christ. There's some fantastic stuff.
So it's making predictions in the Old Testament that are fulfilled in the New Testament, correct?
Yeah. Well, you're the one who brought up predictions.
Right. So my argument here is that the experts don't agree with what you're saying. I mean, I'm not qualified in Greek and Hebrew. I can't prove that right.
Experts do agree. My expert can beat up your expert.
I'd like to see that. We could get Bart Ehrman and who is a good Christian historian to fight. That'd be pretty fun.
Dr. Robert Dye, ex-Westminster President Seminary. I don't know if he knows that kind of stuff. But, you know, I have a thing I say with the Catholics when we coach church fathers. I go, my church father can beat up your church father. Experts contradict each other. How do you determine which ones are the true? You go to the original text. That's what you do. I can show you stuff. Sometime we could have a discussion when it's not a debate. I could just show you stuff.
Well, no, I agree. That's correct. But the people who actually know how to go to the original text and read it with the highest level of accuracy are the experts in the field. I mean, I think they are more qualified than you significantly. Like I would say Bart Ehrman is significantly more qualified than you.
Probably in a lot of areas, and some maybe not. But the thing is that, you know, I've had Greek, and I'm not an expert in any way, but I do have access to experts, and we can translate from the from the Greek into the English, not a big deal. And I have people I know who speak Hebrew, and they can do the same thing for the Old Testament. And I mean, you know, we're not getting anywhere. We need to move on because I got a question for you.
Sure.
If you don't mind, or unless you have questions for me.
Go for it.
Because I listened to a little bit of what you said in with Eli.
Eli
Ayala. And if you ever talk to him again, you got to say that his last name sounds like an Arab death call. And so he got a kick out of that when I said it to him. What I did was I listened to some of that today. Again, no disrespect meant to you. It's not trying to be disrespectful to you in prep and all this stuff. My life, and you know some of the stuff from before we got online.
No problem. Totally okay.
I appreciate that. Okay, thanks. But in fact, okay. So something about the omnis you said, and I'm just curious. Actually, I'm curious to know what you actually believe. That's a whole other thing. Because I don't know what you actually believe. You said, and you speak so fast, it was hard for me to get it down right, but I think I did. If we allow omni properties, anything theology can answer, so can naturalistic science or any ideology. And without omni properties, anything science can't answer, neither can theology. That didn't make any sense to me. Okay.
How so?
First of all, what do you mean by omni properties?
Like omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omnipresent.
Omniscient. Okay. Anything theology can, so can naturalistic science or any ideology without omni properties. So anything theology can answer. So the Christian theology says God knows all things. How do you apply that to naturalistic stuff or science?
Yes. we can answer all questions. So like if we don't know something, like what caused the origin of the universe, then we can apply the omni to the naturalism and say, well, there's this naturalistic thing which is all powerful and it can explain the origin of the universe.
Oh, so you're saying science can answer all questions?
If you allow omni properties.
And wait, okay, that's where I'm having a problem, and I'm not being difficult. If you allow omni properties, how do you connect omni properties to science? What I'm seeing in my head is, here's the concept of science, here's the concept of omniscience, put them together and make a coherent statement about them together. And then how does that work?
Okay, so science doesn't allow things that can't be shown or can't be like verified, essentially. And so we can't verify omni properties, so normally they're not allowed in science. Science would not allow these. But theism doesn't have...
Sorry, doesn't allow omni properties.
It doesn't allow things that can't be verified, so essentially.
But that's not an omni property.
Correct. So I'm giving you, you explained how do I get to this? I'm trying to give you the background.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So science doesn't allow omni properties. It doesn't allow them. I agree with you. But theism does allow omni properties. It doesn't have that criterion that science has. Now, if we get rid of that criterion, well, we're not going to require just verifiable things, and we can add more stuff that isn't verifiable, then we can also use these omni properties and say, well, naturalism has, there's all-powerful aspect of nature that we haven't discovered yet. So we can add the omni property to nature if we don't require it to be verifiable, and we allow non-verifiable things, we can add those omni things scientifically.
Are you saying add the omni property to nature, which means that all questions can be answered in nature? Discovered, discovered, answered in nature by the scientific method?
Yes, I think so. No, right? No. Again, the scientific method is the limitation that says we can only use. So if we get rid of that and allow things that aren't verifiable like theists do, and we can make up new properties like all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving, whatever, and add those into scientific theories, like we could say general relativity is all-powerful, therefore it explains the origin of everything. If we are allowing omni properties in science, because they're not verifiable, science doesn't do this, if it did, science could answer the same questions theology does. Does that make sense?
No. Do you know what Christian omniscience is relating to God?
The knowledge of everything, essentially.
God knows all things. So when you say omniscience, we're only arguing about the Christian God. So the Christian God's quality of omniscience you're going to apply to science? I'm having trouble understanding. I'm not being difficult on purpose. I honestly don't understand.
I totally understand. I totally understand. You're not at all. So you can pick any of the omnis and add them to science if you want them. So you can
how do you do that? Pick omniscience, for example. How do you add it to science?
Well, you could add that to science and say there's a certain kind of naturalistic or pantheism where the God or nature is divine, and you can say it has some divine nature which is conscious, and say has omniscience and knows everything. That would be one way to do it.
So you're saying science is...
I'm sorry, you cut out what?
Science is pantheistic. All nature is divine. That's pantheism.
No. I'm saying if we were allowed to add in things that are not verifiable, science can make up stuff too, just like theists do. So theists, I apologize if that's derogatory. I'm trying to explain it as best I can.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
So from my perspective, theists are adding things that we can't show exist and are not imaginary. They're adding imaginary things to their hypothesis. And if science was allowed to add imaginary things to scientific hypotheses, science could come up with the same kinds of answers that theism does. So for example, take morality. Science say that there is some quantum mechanical wave law that we haven't discovered yet, which is just the law of morality. We can add omnibenevolence to quantum physics as a kind of undiscovered particle or something. And so if we're allowing these properties which are unverifiable to be inserted into scientific theories, which science doesn't do, it's not allowed in science, well, science could answer the same questions theism does with naturalism.
Science can answer the same questions theism does using naturalism?
If we were allowed to add up made up properties, yes. If we were allowed to make up stuff in science, we can always answer.
Okay, I'm not getting you. you and I probably could have a conversation on an app for an hour just on this. I have to ask all kinds of questions. Maybe we could do that sometime because I'm trying to understand you. I'm taking notes. I can show you my camera and show you the screen, all the notes I'm taking here. Science does not allow things that cannot be verified.
Yeah, that's the scientific method. The scientific method says
yes, it does.
So if we don't have that, and the science is not restricted by that, right? It does. But if we get rid of that criterion, and science can just make up stuff as whatever it wants, it can just make up moral particles and other whatever we want, and ziggly woogly booglies that just explain everything. So if science
does assume things it can't verify.
Like what?
Uniformity of nature.
It doesn't assume that.
Nature it does. It assumes that everything's going to operate the same way. That's why you do have science and repeatability. Science is the procedure of learning from the naturalistic realm, and it's limited to naturalistic processes. You see something, you have a hypothesis, which is just a theory, but it's not a theory, it's a hypothesis. You then develop some methodology to test your hypothesis. Your hypothesis is right or wrong or modified, and eventually get to the point of theorization where I can tell you the theory, and you could then repeat the process and get the same kind of evidence. This is purely a naturalistic thing. It presupposes the uniformity of nature, presupposes the universality and abstract necessities of the laws of law. It employs its methodology. So it's a philosophy.
No, we can actually demonstrate the laws of physics changed over time. They weren't the same. They haven't always been the same. Like the law of gravity used to be repulsive rather than attractive. Time bends and shifts all the time. They aren't always the same. The Guth's early universe inflation, when gravity was repulsive, not attractive. So the laws of nature have changed. We don't assume they're uniform. They're only like uniformly described, but we don't assume they're always uniform. And it's kind of like
So then,
go ahead.
Will a ball, when I drop it, go up instead of down here on Earth?
Mechanics.
I'm sorry?
Yes, it can. That is a possibility. It's called quantum mechanics.
Do you understand quantum mechanics? Have you read any books on quantum mechanics? I have.
Yes, I have. I don't understand it.
Good, because that means you've read the books. And if you say you understand it, you forget it. Okay.
Yeah.
But mechanics works on the quanta level, not on the macro level.
Incorrect. It does work on the macro level. The probabilities are just so small that we don't ever see it happening.
Okay, I'll grant you that one. But let's say, back to this idea. So then science itself is a philosophical approach to learning about nature because it presupposes can't test. It cannot test and verify the uniformity of nature because if something has an ontological essence, the properties emanate out of the ontos. If the properties change, it means the ontos is changing, which means then that nature itself is changing.
Yes, nature is changing, but again, we're not trying to prove that nature is always the same. We're just trying to test a hypothesis. So if, like I said, like the example of the fairies, if we believe there are fairies and we say, if there are fairies and I do this prayer thing and the fairy gives me a gold brick, that does not prove there are fairies. There could always be a natural explanation that we just don't know about yet. But it gives us reason to believe that the fairies are it's more reason to believe they exist than they don't exist. Science is the same way. It gives us testable predictions, more reason to believe that uniformity is true in some sense, more than it's not true in some sense. It's not a proof. We can't prove it. We don't assume it's true. It just gives us slightly more reason to believe than not believe.
Are the laws of logic based on nature?
Yes.
If nature is changing, then the laws of
no.
Oh, wait a minute. If they're based on nature, you said yes. They're based on nature. Yes. Therefore, if nature changes, do the laws change?
Well, the laws do change. The laws of logic do change because they're human constructs. They're like a language. It's a formal language. So reality exists, and reality is the way reality is. And we use logic and math to describe reality. And there are different kinds of logics. There are non-standard logic, intuitionistic logic, quantum logic, many-valued logic. There are contradictions in standard logic, such as Lewinsky-Skolem theorem. Standard logic can't express innumerable infinites. Standard logic has unresolvable statements. Standard logic can't be shown to be internally consistent without reference to an external logic. And because of these, there have been different kinds of logics proposed that are not standard logic. They reject the laws of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle. And so the laws of logic, which are created by humans to just describe reality, do change, just like English changes. But reality is reality.
So then does Blue sleep faster on Wednesday?
Only if the square root of a pork chop.
That would make sense from that perspective. It's a good thing that our world doesn't actually work like what you're saying. If nature was changing so that everything was so capricious, then you are actually joining in the argument that I've had so many atheists tell me that if God is the one in control of the universe, at whim, he can change the laws of physics, and we couldn't trust anything to be consistent. You that argument from based on a naturalistic assumption. So
I'm not quite following what you're saying there. So the laws of logic can possibly change. They're, from my perspective, they're human constructs. They're languages. Like English can change. It's a formal language. Like if you just put Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, go to classical logic, the first line is logic is a formal language. Formal languages include C++, logic, math, any Python, any computer language. Those are all formal languages. This is a human-made thing. It doesn't actually exist.
Okay, the laws of logic are human-made. That means they're based on human brains.
Yes, they describe reality. They are not reality.
Okay, so my brain and your brain are different. So then which brain is right when we use the laws of logic if we contradict each other?
We would have to find some other way to describe that.
Well, wait a minute. You said logic is human brains. That means it's a product of human brains. Your brain and my brain are different. We disagree.
Yes.
So which one's correct?
Well, that's like saying if we look at a tree and I use the English word tree and you use the Japanese word for tree, which one of us is correct? Not sure how to answer that.
You said laws are based on human brains. Your brain is a physiological system, as is mine, and chemical reactions occur, sight, hearing, touch, various things, chemical reactions, all right?
Yes.
So you're saying logic is based on, or is it correct to say the product of human brains?
Logic is a language like English. So would you say English is a product of human brains?
Sorry, I apologize. Language is a product of human mind, yeah, languages, yeah.
So I would say logic is the same thing. It's a product of human minds, just like English is to describe what we see in reality. So just like we use the English word tree, which is made up by human brains, to describe the tree, the English word is just a part of our brain, but the tree exists independently of our word English. And so logic is the same thing.
The laws of logic are based on your brains, which describe what you see in nature.
Yes.
How do you see the law of proper inference? A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. It's a logical deduction. How do you do that? How do you observe that in nature?
The same way you observe a tree. Like we don't observe a tree not being not a tree, and so we describe it using the law of identity.
You just presuppose the laws in order to do that. But you said it's the product of your mind.
No,
so you're presupposing what's in your own mind as being true?
No. I'm saying, so if we observe a tree, now the tree may not be there. Like if I appear to be holding a cup, maybe I'm under some delusion and there's no cup. But if I appear to be holding a cup, then I can describe this appearance with the laws of logic. I can say it appears to me I am holding, so not this cup. Now this may not be true at all, but it's a description of what it appears to me that is occurring.
But a description, or talk about logical, what I brought up was the law of proper inference, which is deduction. So if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. By looking at a tree, you don't get that logical deduction by looking at a tree.
The transitive property. So if I see an object and that object A is the same as object B, and the object B is the same as object C, at no point do I see them not being A, B, and C. So I observe this happening, and I describe this happening with the laws of logic in my head.
Your observation is a logical conclusion based on your brain.
No, the observation is what we're describing with logic.
And it occurs in your brain, doesn't it?
Yes.
Then your brain's chemical reactions. How does chemical reactions produce proper logical inference?
No idea. How do calculators do it? I don't know.
Oh, so you're a scientismist.
No.
Faith in science. You don't know. You just so you don't know. So you don't have any idea how one chemical state in the brain that leads to another chemical state in the brain produces proper logical inference.
Correct. I don't know that much about the brain. We haven't solved that problem yet. But
Okay,
I
have you
wanted to
read any
clarify.
papers, heard of anybody saying, yes, we know how chemicals that are just in a brain produce proper logical inference? That applies to other people as well.
No, we also don't know what dark matter is or dark energy. We don't know how consciousness works. We don't know how
Logical
morality works. We
inference,
don't know how
the
cats
brain.
meow. We do lots of things we don't know. Why?
My
Why is
physical
it
brain
surprising?
chemical reaction is different than yours. I have a conclusion. You have a conclusion. And we would know that I was right or wrong based upon chemical reactions in our brains, but that doesn't make any sense. You cannot know if the logical process in your brain is chemical reactions. You can't trust that the chemical reactions are producing truth.
Correct. Just like if there's a God, you can't trust that the God tells you the truth instead of as a deceiver like Descartes' demon.
And since your brain is something that you can't trust to do that, then the whole process that you're based upon, your thinking about your brain, is now suspect and can't be trusted. So you just weakened your whole presuppositional base.
Oh, correct. But just like we can't trust your God to give us the truth because it could be an evil deceiver who's giving us falsity. So, I mean,
that's a logical non sequitur in Christianity. Remember, you said your God, our God it's impossible for God to lie. It's impossible for him to be a deceiver. Titus 1:2. Right, and I can just, he cannot lie.
Correct. So I could just say the same thing and say it's there's some law of nature that we haven't discovered yet, which makes it impossible for us not to have accurate logical deductions. I can make up something and presuppose it as a fundamental part of the universe, just like you've done, and get the same result.
I didn't make it up. I read it out of script. Titus 1:2. I didn't make it up.
Well, I would qualify that as making it up. I apologize.
I'm sorry, but it's not making it up. I read it as something that is not from me. It precedes me. There's historical evidence based upon it in its historical context with the apostles and the person and work of Christ who rose from the dead, etc. And you said equate that to just making something up. That's not the case.
Oh, correct. So I didn't mean you personally. I meant the Christians in general. I believe all of these ideas are made up by Christians. So
you're debating me.
The stories. What?
You're debating me, not other Christians.
Well, correct. This is a terminology usage here that I wasn't being specific enough in this context. So just like Christians make things up, we atheists can also make things up. So you, from my perspective, I apologize if this is again derogatory. I'm trying to just explain this. Just like I believe that theists have made up a basis of reason to believe in reality. They say that God is morally perfect, and so he's going to give us reason to believe truth as opposed to falsity. We naturalists can do the same thing, and we can say there is an undiscovered law of nature which is has some property in it which makes it necessarily the case that we assess truth with our brains as opposed to falsity. So we can make up a natural thing that does the same thing.
You said Christians make things up. I didn't make it up. You're debating me, not Christians. Wait, I don't hear you. Say something.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. I hear you. Sorry.
Okay, so from that was just my interpretation of gave, which is the Cartesian circle. It's called the Cartesian circle. It's a known fallacy of vicious circularity. It's the textbook example of vicious circularity. It's called the Cartesian circle, where you say that we can believe truth because God gives us truth. That argument, we can use the same thing, replace God with a natural law that we haven't discovered yet, and get the same result.
Okay. Replace God with a natural law. So you're a naturalist.
No, I'm saying this is a possibility. I'm saying naturalists could do this and get the same result.
But we're not a naturalist.
So
again, you're not arguing Bob next door. You're arguing with me. I want to argue with you, not with other people. You bring other people into the discussion. We can't cross-examine them or their reasons or the context. But you said, that people make things up. I'm assuming you're saying I make things up about Christianity.
No, I was specifically referring to your argument about the Cartesian argument that we can know truth because of God gives us truth. That argument, that conclusion is made up. That's not true. It's in fact, it's viciously circular and can be demonstrated to not be the case.
Well, that presupposes there is no God.
No, this is epistemological. I'm not saying there isn't a God. I'm saying that argument, the epistemological argument, doesn't.
You're not saying there is no God, but you're arguing as though there isn't a God, and saying that we're making stuff up about God that you're saying really can't exist.
No. God may or may not exist. It could be the case that God exists. Now let's just put that aside for a moment and say there's this argument that you created. Penguins are red, therefore bunnies exist or something. That argument is a bad argument whether or not God exists or not, right? Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so the argument you presented that we can know truth because God has this particular nature to give us truth, that is a bad argument. Not whether or not God exists, that argument is a bad argument.
It's a good
Just like
argument. The only way to know something for absolute truth is if an omniscient being gives you that knowledge. If he knows all things and he tells you what is the truth, like Jesus, God in flesh, according to John 1:1 and verse 14, Colossians 2:9, Philippians 2:5-8. See, I can talk quickly also. And he's the one who said in John 14:6, he said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father but by me. That if he's God in flesh, that's an absolute truth statement then. Then if it is that he is who he said he was, then that would be knowing absolute truth. But you wouldn't know that because the chemical reactions in your brain produce things that you don't know if are true or not. You can't argue against me because I could just say, like I said to Delahanty, your brain made you say that.
Well, I could just say the evil deceiver made you say that. So
No,
to try and explain this,
I got you first. Your brain say that is not logically necessary that the question that you're proposing is valid. Hey, that's how it works. You see, I have something outside of myself, the scriptures. I have something that's verifiable, Old Testament and New Testament. I have stuff that's verifiable time-wise as being separated by hundreds of years and written by eyewitnesses. I have ways of verifying this kind of a thing and presenting arguments for this. But you're the one who has said earlier that basically your brain is chemical reactions and you're going to produce knowledge out of your chemical reactions. And I ask you how you know these things are true, and you don't.
No. That's my argument is that just like you say there's this thing outside of you, which is a God, and that God gives you a justification for believing the laws of logic, I can say there is something outside of me, which is a law of nature we haven't discovered yet, which tells me that the laws of logic are absolute. And so I have an equally absolute reason to believe they're absolutely true as you do.
So you appeal to what's not there. I appeal to what is there. Not discovered. That's you. I have the Bible, the Old Testament prophecies, New Testament stuff. I have the book of Acts written roughly 60 AD. Matthew, Mark, Luke written before them. I can go into all the logic of this, written early on, and the documents are very well preserved. I don't know if you know that, but they're exceedingly well preserved. I mean, we could discuss these things and about people making stuff up. Let's make it up that Jesus rose from the dead. It'll cost us our lives, our wives, our children, and torture and everything else. Let's make it up. Come on. Your questions make more problems than they solve.
Right. I could write this down and then have a piece of paper that says this is true, and we're on equal footing.
Really? You do that from 66 different books written over a 14 to 1600 year period, 3 different continents, 3 different languages, and you have in there codes and patterns, which I haven't even shown you yet exist. And you have them there that are just tremendously detailed. You have the prophecies, the virgin birth, when he's going to be born, how long he's going to be in the grave, that he will not die and stay in the grave, that he's going to be born in Bethlehem, that he's going to come in to Jerusalem at a certain time on a certain day. You do that. But remember, you said earlier, I'm taking a little bit of a shot at you, they're super subjective, or I forgot the word you said, super vague. Super vague.
Correct. If you're right about that, then that is evidence. You're right. You win the argument. Problem is that the experts in the field disagree with you on that, and I'm not qualified to disagree with them. I'm going to defer to the experts, and they say that is incorrect. If you were correct, you're right. That's evidence.
That's a cop-out.
Well, I mean, I don't have a qualification in Greek or Hebrew. I can't actually. I mean, that's not. I'm not trying to cop out here. It's just.
Tell you what, I'm going to offer you something. For real. This is not mockery. This is nothing. We could do a Skype call. I can share my computer screen. I can show you the Hebrew. I can show you the Greek with interlinears. We could do it together, and I can show you stuff. I can show you these things. I can show it to you. I can show you patterns.
I really enjoy talking.
I can show you patterns that cannot be explained by any naturalistic method.
and he can show you all the naturalistic methods that can explain it.
Do you believe in mathematics, right?
Yes.
Math relates to reality, right?
Yes, some of it.
Okay, all right. Now, if we have see if I can say this concept, you can have a level of impossibility if the probability exceeds the potential, mathematical potential numerically, of a set of circumstances, a set of criteria. If, for example, the universe is 18 billion years old, and if every particle in the universe were changing its state at the maximum possible state that it can according to physics for 18 billion years, you only have 10 to the 138th power events in the entire known universe. Every particle changing its rate or its state at 10 to the 40th times per second for 18 billion years, every particle in the universe, you have 10 to the 138th power occurrences. Okay?
Okay.
If something exceeds that, would you say it's equivalent to zero? Say an odds of something forming, occurring, are 1 times 10 to the power. We'd say no, it's zero, right?
No, it's 1 to the 10 to the 28th power. That's not zero.
It's 2,000th. That exceeds the 138th power.
Okay, so that wouldn't be zero. That would be 1 to the 38th power, whatever number you said.
10 to the 2,000th power.
10 to the 2,000.
Right.
Zero. That's 10 to the 2,000th power. 1 in 10 to the 2,000th power.
Yeah. It comes into the field of impossibility because it exceeds the natural potential of the resources that are mathematically there and available.
No, I can no. That would be like there's a couple things I want to bring up there. One is that it applies if what you described is the extent of all natural things, which is not. So there could be that would be describing all of the known natural particles. But there could be other things that we haven't discovered yet which drastically increase the number of particles, like antimatter particles, like dark matter and dark energy. There could be in quantics, and so that number only applies if you only include the known natural particles and think that's it, we've discovered everything, which we haven't. So there's lots of stuff out there that we haven't discovered. In fact, there's new theories by Sean Carroll, Nima Arkani Hamad, of natural things existing outside of space and time. So there's a lot more stuff out there than just those things. And even does
does he prove that those things exist outside of space and time?
No, it's hypothetical. So if you
if God exists outside of space and time, the Christian God, so is that potentially okay as well?
Yes, potentially, yeah.
There's another reason to believe in him, since if you're going to cite someone as evidence for your position, and I cite the same principle and apply it to God, are you going to have a double standard?
No, I wasn't citing that as evidence. I was just citing that as a possibility. That was not evidence.
Oh, possibility.
Okay,
so what you're doing is arguing from what you don't have.
Well, that wasn't an argument. That was just an example of things that could exist outside of our known universe. So I was just saying things can exist outside of our known universe. That was it. That was the only argument there. So the point being that it's possibility. I don't deny that possibility as long as there are no contradictions in God's property. But your example
by
said
definition, he wouldn't be self-contradictory because he would be what he is. Something is what it is, and is not what it is not. The law of identity, which you would concede is true. And if God exists, then he can't be internally inconsistent. Otherwise, he wouldn't be existing in his ontological nature.
Right, which is what I'm saying. He doesn't exist because he's contradictory, because his ontological nature is self-contradictory like a square circle. That would be my argument. But I wanted to bring up your point.
So many questions I got to ask you.
Wait, go back. I want to go back. So you said there is a possibility of 1 in 10 to the something occurring, right?
Yeah.
That means that, like, if we have a deck of cards, the probability of getting a royal flush is, I don't know. I don't remember the actual numbers, but it's 1 in whatever it is. And any kind of combination of 5 cards of the deck has the exact same probability. So no matter what, every single possibility has the exact same probability of 1 in 10 to the 2,000th power. Every possibility. They all have the exact same probability. So whatever happened in the universe is going to have a probability of 1 in 10 to the 2,000th power. So your possibility of it occurring is the exact same as whatever actually occurred.
You need to study information theory and what it is, probability issues as they relate to the How do we get into this?
Well, so information theory was invented by Claude Shannon in a paper in, I think, 1953 or something, where he introduces information theory in the form of any kind of stochastic system that can create a discernible pattern is a form of information. And he was an atheist. So information theory is grounded in atheism and just numbers. Stochastic system means random. So it has nothing to do with the mind.
Sorry.
There's no requirement there for
Yeah, he presupposes
intelligence.
logic in order to do that, which you can't account for in an atheistic worldview because your brain is just simply physically producing chemical reactions. We already went through that. But
I think, again,
the issue of information
actually,
theory has to do with energy and complexity. You have to have specificity in the complexity. It's simply an issue of a mathematical probability, and each thing's equal. You have to have a range of information, and we recognize what that is. But hey, we're digressing into information, which should be another topic worth getting into.
Quick comment on that. Specified complexity isn't a thing. It's completely made up. It has no basis in any kind of academic field. But to go back to your point,
I disagree with you.
I mean, I'm gonna go with the experts on this one in every field of biology and information theory and mathematics who completely reject the work of Stephen Meyer and I forgot the other guy's name. But
William Dembski?
I wanted to go back to your point. Dembski, yes.
Yeah, he's got PhDs in mathematics and are just dismissed. Why are they dismissed? Because they don't fit the presuppositional base. That's what I see happening all the time with people who claim to have science, claim to have knowledge, because their presuppositions work. We get into the issue of presuppositions. That's where it's going to really hit the fan. Because the scientific method presupposes the laws of logic and the uniformity of nature. It presupposes it. If you're going to be naturalistic, you refute yourself. I don't even know what your real position is to attack that.
So the reason Myers and Dembski's work is rejected is because they conflate Shannon and Kolmogorov complexity, which leads to a Berry paradox, and it literally the math doesn't work. But going back to what you said about the laws of logic, yes, we can explain them naturally.
All right, y'all. We got about 5 minutes. We're gonna go about 5 more minutes, and we'll close it up.
All right, so we can say the laws of logic exist as an undiscovered law of nature. They're just a part of nature that is just an undiscovered law that exists out there, if you want to. Yep. We can say that just like you can say they're part of God's mind. So yes, we can make up an explanation that explains the law, just like the theist can. We just choose not to. So the more accurate answer is that the laws of logic are just a language and not actually existing, but that's a different point. So yes, the naturalist can also account for those. It's not just a God. You don't need a God to account for those.
You believe in the theory of evolution?
Yes.
Why? Because there's evidence to support it?
Yes, there is more evidence to support it's true than to support it's not true.
Okay, I would disagree with you, but that's another topic. So you presuppose things because you have explanatory power based on the evidence that you observe.
I didn't say I presuppose anything. I didn't say I presuppose anything yet. I didn't say I presupposed anything yet.
You said you believe in evolutionary theory.
Correct, but that's not a presupposition.
Yeah, it is.
A presupposition is something you believe.
Have you seen one species evolve into another species?
Indirect observation, yes.
You have?
Indirect observation, yes. Like there's multiple kinds of observation. So, like in empiricism, indirect observation and direct observation are both forms of observation. So you could observe something indirectly and still observe it. So yes, we have.
You don't know if the evolutionary macro is working with the issue of the information genomes and the genes that need to be formed and transferred. You know about the 3 types of information transference or development. You have evolutionary theory. There are 3 main types: reduction of gene information, or the copying or transmission of it from one organism to another.
And the increase of information through increased complexity, yes. So you increase, there's a reduction, and there's a nothing. There's no change.
I know that you have not studied this very well.
I have quite studied this quite well.
Epigenetics.
Sure.
What's epigenetics?
Changes to genetics that happen outside of the genome. Things that happen like related to the external world, not specifically genetically related to the ATCG.
Good, very good, very good. So you do know. All right, so let's get back into this a little bit because we're going to wipe this thing out here. I lost my train of thought.
Okay. My last point was that laws of logic by saying it's an undiscovered law of nature, just like theism can.
Yeah, so what you're doing is you're just offering wishful thinking and a hopeful guess. And you
Yep.
say I'm doing the same thing, but I'm not.
Yep.
No, I'm
Okay,
not.
what's the
I'll
difference?
show you why I'm not. Because for one thing, Jesus Christ came to me when I was 17. His presence was there. Now, I'm not offering this as proof, but this is something that occurred. You can say, oh, other people had experiences, so we can compare those experiences, but that's another topic for another time. We also have the Old Testament documents, which were written before the time of Christ, and there were fulfillments of those things in the Old Testament, which you're forced to say are just super vague, and they're not super vague. I've read them many, many times. I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times, read them to people and said, what do you think of that? They didn't even know I'm reading out of the Bible. Sounds like Jesus being crucified. Sounds like he's born here and there. When people don't know what I'm reading, they're more objective. When they do know what I'm reading, they're far less objective in what they say, because if they were to admit my position, then they're admitting that their position is weak. So this is why you have to say things like, it's super vague. It's not super vague. That's subjectivism imposed upon the evidence. This is a presuppositional problem that you have.
Well, I'm saying the Hebrew and the Greek are vague because the words can mean many.
Words mean what they mean in context.
Right, and you can interpret the context in many different ways. That's what makes it vague.
You know what? You're right. I did win this one, and thank you for the new car. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Exactly.
You just did, because words can mean whatever you want them to mean. Thank you. You just conceded that I won everything, and I am better looking. I know, but you got to deal with it.
Well, exactly. But in the context in the Hebrew and what the words meant in Hebrew, if we're interpreting it using the standard academic understanding of how the words work, there are still many different ways to interpret that, even given the context.
You ever heard of hermeneutics, interpretation method? Or does that only apply to you and not to that, or vice versa?
No, it does apply to that. But again,
you ever heard me say go like this to anybody?
Oh, yeah, the eye poke thing.
No, go ahead. Go like this. Now, look to your left. Now slap yourself upside the head.
Oh,
okay.
No, you go like this. But so again, I'm not following your argument here. So from my position,
we're just off topic. I don't know where we're going now.
I
remember. This is scripture. It's not made up. It's not made up because I had the Old Testament, New Testament. It's not made up. You have to say it's made up. You and I are going to have a talk.
Great discussion, fellas. You guys, it's a great discussion. I'm just sitting in the background, muted mic and everything, just listening to it. So I really enjoyed it, man. So thank you guys, man. Great discussion.
Really enjoyed talking with you, Matt. That was a lot of fun.
Hey, I had a good time. I got to say something about you in a good way. I've talked to a lot of atheists. A lot of them are obstreperous, but you're not. You're polite. So I appreciate that. Thanks. Hope I was polite enough with you as well.
Yeah, I wanted to say that about you too. A lot of atheists accuse you of being not completely open and honest and accurately representing your position. I just think people don't like that they don't explain things well enough, that you just grant them, and so I think they call you dishonest for that reason. And you're not at all. You're completely honest.
No. I don't know if you know this, but I have Asperger's, and I don't know how much of that is a good excuse or not a good excuse. But I go, wait a minute, what about that? I do get that way. It bugs the crap out of my wife. But what I'll tell you, if I'm saying, no, I don't understand you, which I still don't understand your application of the omnis to the thing. I'm not trying to get all this all over again. But I was dead serious. I don't get it sometimes. And that's it, whatever. Maybe it's you, maybe it's me, maybe it's a little bit of both. I don't know.
Yeah, you seem completely honest.
I'm never disingenuous.
All right. Thank you, fellas. I appreciate you both for taking time at your schedule to come on and have this very important discussion. Any closing words, any closing statements by either of you or anything like that?
If you're ever up in Idaho, or if I'm down in Arizona when we move, come on over. We can have a beer together.
Yeah, or Minnesota, where I live. I'll buy you a beer too.
All right.
All right, fellas. Good stuff. Once again, appreciate you. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. So thank you once again. All right, that's it, folks. The gospel truth. And as I expected, Tom Jump and Matt Slick had a great discussion. Obviously, this is not just about the discussion, it's about the gospel in totality. So, it is extremely vital that we don't get caught up so much in just having simple discussions. We have to centerline on the gospel. And it is not only our duties, me and Matt's duties, to continue to proclaim the gospel, not only to Tom Jump, but also to all those who may be like-minded Tom Jump and other worldviews that don't agree with the Christian worldview. We have to be able to continue to preach the gospel and be centerline in everything that we do with the gospel. But with that said, we're going to present the gospel. The gospel is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. He died, he rose, and a lot of people like to forget that he rose. A lot of people say, yeah, he died, he died on the cross and was buried, but we also have to emphasize the power of the resurrection in that. Because Jesus Christ rose from the dead, he also gave those who believe in him the power to raise as well, and raise from a dead state, a state of dry bones, into a life, everlasting life, and live eternity with him. And that's what I want to say to Tom as well. Just the gospel is the power unto salvation. And I just pray, Tom, that God will reach to your heart and regenerate your heart and turn you away from your sin, because the wrath of God is on you and all those who are not in line with God. And that gospel proclamation not only is for Tom Jump, but all those out there as well. If you're viewing this and you don't know God, I pray that you repent and turn away from your sin, because the wrath of God is on you. With that said, just be on the lookout for my upcoming events. I'll be posting upcoming events on my YouTube page and on my Facebook page. So just go ahead and be on the lookout for that. With that said, I'm signing out of here. May God bless you and may God keep you. And once again, Matt, Tom, good looking out. I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good one. God bless everyone out there. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, share, all this stuff. Put that stuff out there so people can hear the gospel. And thank you so much. May God bless you and may God keep you.